Well, hello everyone. It's another episode of Unstable Vitals. And as we all know, healthcare is unstable, and so is Laura. Well, and me too.
That's
But it's
usually collective we, that we are unstable. That's because we're the partners hosting the podcast about and we are unstable. I mean, I'm not in this alone, buddy.
okay. I agree. We're in the same boat. We're both unstable. But who is the person who's not unstable? Is Alison Fragale, who is with us today. She is kind of fun fact. She was one of my. She is actually. Don't tell anybody else this, but like my favorite professor in business school at UNC. No, for real, and was my negotiations professor, and taught me how to take a paperclip and turn it into a really nice vacuum cleaner. And it was a negotiation of trades and things to try to find that common kind of like, why would someone else want a paperclip? Well, maybe they needed it. And eventually, after 10 trades, I ended up with like some vacuum cleaner. And so that really impressed me a lot.
Can I tell my story? Because
Of
by the
course.
time I was running the MBA online at UNC, and we could buy anything that was cheap. So I bought this little packet on Amazon of some nail files and these little foot files, like just the little disposable thing. And I traded it for an Easter basket. And then I worked my way all the way up through some Golden Goose shoes. And then I got a ginormous Oriental rug, but I couldn't figure out how to get it from Atlanta to Colorado. So then I wound up with like the $700 pair of shoes, which they were too small for me. So I gave them to somebody else. And my paper was how I traded it for a new friend, because it was my new boyfriend, now his husband's, like one of his best friends. And I gave her $700 shoes. So I turned a nail file into a friend.
I love that. Oh my
Yes, so
God.
we're so happy to have you, Allison.
I'm so happy to be here.
Well, today, on Unstable Vitals, we talk about what are some of the challenges in healthcare, because we do believe that healthcare is unstable. And you can see it with rising prices and access issues. You can see it with the way that leadership is within the healthcare system, whether it's in health systems, payer spaces, doctors' offices, and even women in leadership positions within healthcare, the lack thereof. We see it. Lara speaks about this frequently, about the lack of funding that happens in women's health. And so we wanted to bring you on because you wrote a book recently called The
One of my
Likeable Badass.
favorites.
It's
Likeable
an
Badass.
amazing book. So I just, tell us a little bit first about you. I mean, we could go through your bio, but it's better hearing it from you. And then tell us about your book. This is amazing stuff.
Sure. So, all right. So my current gig is I'm an organizational psychologist. That's how you guys know me, because I'm a business school professor. But basically what I do is I take psychology, behavioral science, and help people use it to solve problems, whether it's negotiate for something, influence, advocate for yourself. In the case of the book, I talk about earning respect, which we talk about as status to be respected and regarded by other people, and what's the science of that. Like, how does one person decide they're going to respect another person, and where does that leave you for how you can influence how you show up in ways that get you the respect and value from your audience. That's a really important currency for living a happy life and being able to navigate your career. So that's what I do. And I wrote that book for women, even though respect is not a gendered concept, just because it's an audience I care about, and because we know that gender does impact respect, that all other things being equal, if we use the comparison referent category of man, anyone who is not a man will generally get less respect from the outset. And so that's why I wrote it for women. And, it came about, honestly, I say it came about because of my students, like not the two of you specifically, but just the years of students that I had, because business school is still, most places, skews male. And so I would have relatively fewer women in my programs, but they would always be the ones who would approach me and ask me for advice about challenges they were having, trying to navigate their professional career and influence and advocate for themselves. And I was dispensing a lot of advice one-on-one, really about how to make sure that your audience valued you and respected you as a foundation for being able to go in and ask for the things that you very much deserve. So it was in those conversations that these ideas and putting them out there into a larger audience came about. And then everyone, like, you want some story of like, this was the inspiration of the moment I decided I was going to write a book. I'd had this book floating around in my head for a long time, but as you know, like, we're busy people, books take a while to do. And it was really the pandemic that gave me the space to be able to do it, because when you are an audience facing person for your job, like, unlike the two of you who probably were never busier in your lives than in COVID, I was the opposite, right? All of a sudden I'm in my house and my calendar has gone completely empty. And I realized very early on I was not baking sourdough bread, and I had already watched The Tiger King. And I'm like, okay, out of ideas. So I started posting on LinkedIn and I wrote a book. And so I think if not for the pandemic, the book would still be an idea that was rattling around in my head.
Oh, that's so fascinating. The name of the book, Likeable Badass. I love that. No, obviously I'm not a woman, but I talk with my business school students, because I teach at UNC too, about really that importance that you can be a badass. You can be someone who is doing all these amazing things. I mean, Laura's a great example. I mean, she's definitely, likable, but she's a badass. No, I'm joking. Like, she's very likable, and people gravitate towards that. People respect you more for that. People want to. It's not being a pushover. It's not being someone who is just can be trampled upon. Because I think if you try to do that to Laura, you'd end up dead. But
I might want to fall on you.
No.
No, I would totally beat the shit out of you if you tried to come at me.
Exactly. But I think it's important that message gets out there, because I think at least, and this is one of the things, why I liked UNC so much, is it wasn't a cutthroat environment. It was an environment that was more collaborative, and one where you tried to work with people, and really the currency of kindness and engendered respect, and then that helped you further get what things that you want. So I loved the concept of the book, and I really thought, I know you wrote it for women, but I took it from me too. So
No, I'm always very, very flattered when men pick it up and they say, I found a lot here for me, which is true. Nothing about it, again, nothing in between the covers is gender specific. It's just, I said when I sold the book, I said, there's two things that I'm not interested in negotiating. So if you don't like these things, please don't buy it, because we're just going to get in a fight. I said, the title will be Likeable Badass, and I want to write it for women, even though from a marketing perspective, people who want to sell books would say, okay, well, you could sell more if you didn't do that. But I appreciate that, and I am very flattered anytime a man picks it up and opens the cover and finds something in there for themselves.
Well, what I loved was there were so many things I remembered from the classes, like the small deposits, things that because I'm 54, right? I'm the oldest one here today. I'd like to point out again, there are things that I've learned to do along the way that you put a name to, like be nice to people. Just be nice to people if it doesn't bother you to do something for them. And those are the people who come back and help you later, those tiny little favors. So there was things I saw peppered throughout there. But I remember you mentioned that in the book. And I think you might have actually sold more, because that title is so catchy, and it directly speaks to an audience that really needs it, as opposed to calling it How to Get Respect in 300 pages.
No, I always said 80% of the success of any book is the title, because it has to be exciting. The underlying Likeable Badass is a catchy reference to what in psychology is known as the interpersonal circumflex of person perception. And I always laugh. I'm like, that would have been a good title for a book.
I was like, whoa, that's an amazing. Can you say
that?
Is that the thing about, like, I'm having 6 conversations right now because I'm having a conversation with who you are and who I think you are and what you think of me and what I think you think of me? Is that thing?
No, it's basically the two dimensions of assertive and warm. And if you think about those two axes, you can put a circle around them. And essentially you could be anywhere in that circle of how people see you. And so interpersonal circumflex, a circle of person perception. Like, we perceive people based on where they fall in that space. And that's what leads to the judgments of them. But as I said, like, world's worst book title.
It's so as I think about this from the healthcare perspective, we have I've spoken about this before, about the lack of women being in leadership positions and the importance for men to take more sponsorship type of roles, and not mentorship, but actually sponsorship, like looking for opportunities for women. But it doesn't just stop there. You know, there's other things that have to happen. So I think my first question to you is, if you look at the healthcare space, there is a lack of women in leadership roles. It is getting better, but it is certainly not there. When more than 50% of the medical school classes are women, that's been the case since 2000. We see medical faculty approaching almost 50%, like around 45%. But yet, when you look at the deans across the country, that's still a quarter of the male population. If you look at department chairs, that's around a quarter. I used to, there was a study that came out that called it the beard. I think it was like the beard quotient or the beard coefficient, is like, if you had a beard, you're more likely to be in a leadership position. Of course, it was making a joke, you know, a bit, but it was an interesting article. We actually did that as a book club or a journal club article in my department one night. But why do you think that's still happening? And a bigger question that deserves a lot more time is, how can this change, especially in an environment with things like DEI or, you know, lightning bolts and that sort of thing? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think it happens for a confluence of reasons, right? And I mean, some of it is bias, and we still associate leader with male. We still associate even doctor with male, and that I would say that's not something that men do. That's something that people do. So I posted this in social a while back. My son potentially broke his finger, and as I don't know how I got so lucky, but somehow my husband was home and took him to the urgent care, and I didn't have to draw that short straw, but he did it. So I'm home, you know, doing my other thing, texting with him, because it's, you know, it takes a while, and my husband says, X-ray's done, doctor just came in. And what do I text back? Oh, what did he say? Right. And my husband wrote back, well, she, capitals, she said that. And I'm like, damn, I did that. So
it's a real thing
Yeah.
for my internet today is terrible. I think I'm living with Austrian internet. Anyway, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I was going to say, I do the same thing, and I'm a woman doctor, and I've had to train myself because I knew I had to be better, faster, smarter, better. And so when I get on an airplane and I see the pilot's female, I have to, because I'm terrified of everything in the world because I'm postmenopausal, but I have to tell myself she's better. Like, because my first instinct is, why is there a girl flying the plane?
Yeah. So I think it's really important to understand it's not something that men do to women, it's something people do. So there's bias, right? I mean, there's self-selection that is related to bias as well. Of, you know, when we look at data that's not healthcare specific, but of you seeing senior women leaving their organizations at greater rates than junior women, which seems at first glance surprising, because you think, wait, they're the ones who made it through, right? They survived, they got it, they did it. But when you look at why, it's a status story, a respect story, because what they find is, yes, they have advanced. Yes, they have become senior. Yes, they have some power, but they still like have all of these respect issues where, you know, people question their judgment. They imply they're not qualified for their job. They leave them out of the information flow. They say that, you know, unkind things about them behind their back. And we don't want to be in those kind of situations. They're toxic to us. And so if we have options, you know, we leave. So I think there's like, why it happens is similar to why it happens everywhere, and a lot of bias. But in terms of what people can do about it, and this is really where the space I play in, which is what I help individuals do, is to think about the variables that are under their control to get the best possible outcomes for themselves, given a whole lot of things they don't get to control. And so bias is something you don't get to control, but what do you have left that you can influence? And so I think for individuals, that's what's important is, one thing is, yes, should we all have people being allies and sponsors? Sure. But I will tell you this, it is a lot easier for you to be a sponsor if you know what someone wants. And so I see too many people who are quiet about what they want because they don't want to look like they're overconfident or they're reaching. I literally just had a conversation with a friend who is a physician, who's basically in a big admin role. And she's gonna have a conversation about what admin role she wants to do after that. And she has her eye on a big one. And she's like, I don't know if I should say it. I said, you absolutely say it, for a couple of reasons. One is, it's a lot easier for them to sponsor you if they know what you want, because to feel like I'm going to step in and try to get this person advanced, the worst possible thing is for them to say they don't want it. I mean, and you know this too. I've talked to lots of physicians who say like, I don't want to be my department chair. Like that's a terrible job. And I don't want to be like the chief. I want to be a clinician. So putting out there what you want does a variety of things. One, it's a good first offer in a negotiation for people. Two, it gives people time to get their head around it, because even if people are supportive of you, we can't just like move things around normally in an hour's notice. Like things take time, right? The system is big and complicated. And three, it's a lot easier to help people. Like every time I talk to somebody who's job searching, which is pretty frequent, and I say, how can I help you? And they're like, well, and I'll ask them like, what's an ideal role? And they won't answer the question because they're trying to keep themselves open. And I said, if you're just telling me you want a job, I'm going to be a lot less useful to you than if you say, right, I am looking for senior level marketing roles in like in like consumer products, right? Okay, at least I know like something to do. So I think that I see too many women who have ambition, who aren't out there from the very first day talking about what that is, and it makes it harder for the allies and sponsors to also do their work. But what I do think that allies and sponsors could do as well is to engage people in serious questions of curiosity, of like, tell me what you want, and earn their trust so that they'll tell you what they really want and draw it out of them, and then keep your ears open for opportunities to elevate them on that path.
I think that's such an important point. And I know I talk about this with business school students and my students a lot, and that is it's kind of two pieces. If you're wanting number one, I always tell people, okay, you tell me you want a job or a title. No. It's a job description. What are the things that you want to do? What are the values that really make you tick in the morning, that get you excited? And how do those type of values ladder up to a job description? A job description or a title is what some organization has thought about a bucket of activities. That doesn't mean that that's the same bucket of activities across every single organization. And so that's number one. So really, I think understanding the values, but I think your point around being willing to stand up and either say, this is the type of job I want, or these are the activities or characteristics of the job I want, and feeling comfortable to go to someone who could potentially be an ally or sponsor is so critical. Because a lot of times I talk to the students, they're like, well, I want to be VP of such and such. Well, what does that role do? And it's like, well, yeah. It's like, okay, like that doesn't help me because it may not be within your organization that I can help you find that position.
Okay, so when we do get these positions, women doctors are still making close to 6 figures less on average than their male counterparts. Why?
I mean, again, same thing, right? So there's a variety of things. One is we often pay based on prior salaries, right? So we give people raises as a function of where they currently are, so that gaps that exist just ultimately compound over time. We see evidence that when women attempt to negotiate for more pay, they are much less likely to get it. People think that they will have to pay men more. Like a bias we have is we'll have to pay men more to get them, and we often will pay what we think we have to pay to get the deal. We do, like this when we think that's, oh my God, that's terrible. But like when you go to get a car, you're like, I'm going to pay more than I think I have to pay. No, I'm going to feel out the situation, and I'm going to think about the least I can pay to make this whole thing happen. And yes, in an employment context, yes, you have to work with the person, but it's similar, right? Which is, I'm going to pay what I think I have to pay to solve the problem. And so people expect that men will have higher salary expectations, which leads us to offer them more, in the beginning. And so it's a series of challenges that you see in every single industry. It's not a healthcare specific thing, right? Every organization is going to have a pay equity issue. And so what I always advise people is to start negotiating that stuff early and often, because you don't want to have make up a big gap later in your career. And the belief that I am going to go into the organization, do good work, prove how good I am, and then they're going to give me more money is a lie. Because what happens is you have to think about your alternatives. Like your alternatives are the strongest once they've decided they want you and before you've taken the job. because you're not embedded. Once you're working for someone and you go ask for more money and they don't give it to you, you have two choices. Either stay there without more money or leave. Leaving is a lot of work. You're embedded, right? Most people have families at this point. They have like lives. They might have a partner who has a job. Leaving is just not that easy. It's a lot easier to negotiate when you haven't taken the job and saying, hey, if I don't get this. So I always encourage people. I see too many people who say, I'm not getting what I want right now, but that's okay. I'll go there. I'll do good work and I will then ask for it later. And I said, you can do that. But psychologically, what they're going to see is you're kind of stuck at that point. Mm-hmm. So that's not to say women have done anything wrong in the process, Lara. They haven't, but it means that we have to do everything right. Like we have to be smart advocates for ourselves because we are encountering, systemic pay inequalities that persist across all companies, all organizations.
So these are issues that are related to the individual, or the individual's family. So the ability to have the position that someone wants, or the ability to have the income that someone wants, clearly issues. But how does that translate to potentially causing problems to patients, patient access, or the healthcare system? What are some of your thoughts on that? I mean, you're an organizational psychologist. So in my mind, I'm thinking you're someone who looks at the entirety of the organization. So if you don't have people getting what they need, or you don't have the right people in the right positions, or women are not at the top, especially of healthcare, or at least representative of healthcare, what are some of the implications of that, and how can that make the system unstable?
Well, one of the things we see in organizational science is that when we think about the greatest predictor of team performance, so if we think about a healthcare system as a team, is going to be cognitive diversity and thinking about things differently. So I'd say it's not just demographic diversity that we need, but with demographic diversity often comes cognitive diversity because people have different experiences, different lived experiences. They see and think about things differently. So that I think is the real homogeneity is a huge weakness for any team that aspires to high performance. And I would say nowhere in healthcare is high performance more important. And so that's how I would think is it affects that, the entire system in that regard. So even if a person is, even having people, who are doing administrative things, who are now no longer clinicians, and they may not even be patient facing anymore, right? It's still creating, that team environment to be able to function well together and to create systems, policies, services that are going to benefit the whole. And then certainly if you're patient facing, there's a variety of things. And one is like similarity and trust. We are much more likely to trust people and like people when they're like us in some way. And for a lot of people, right, they say, like, I've never seen a doctor that I think is similar to me. And one of the jobs of a physician is to be able to create that trust by like having the good, like when you think about bedside manner, right? Bedside manner to be able to find those points of connection with your patients and, talk about them and get them to, want to open up to you and trust your guidance and all of that. And similarity can be a big part of that. So if we have a very homogeneous appearing pool of clinicians, that what can happen for patients is people they're not digging, right? Because they feel like there's a power status imbalance in that relationship and they're not trying to build the similarity. It's kind of up to the clinician to do it. And they think this person doesn't get me. This person doesn't like me. That's like all what's going on inside their head. And therefore I don't trust your guidance. I don't tell you the truth. I do all of that. And so I think that's really important as well for managing patient psychology.
Okay. I was going to say, by similarity, did you imply that Adam and I found each other because we're both mentally unwell? But no. Okay, I wanted to pivot to something in that, which is, because I'm an old lady now with lots of degrees, I have a number of younger women that I have just mentored over the years. And I used to be an emergency room pediatrician, and I was in a hospital in New York City. And sometimes I would get bored, and so I would play little games with the residents. And one of them was, listen to me speak, and I would say ridiculous things, but I wouldn't raise my voice in a question mark at the end. I would say it like with just absolute confidence. I know that's one of your focuses, is how we phrase things, but I would say things like, the sky is green, and they'd be like, is it? And I'm like, no, dummy. But talk to us about that.
Yeah, so when we think about there's two things that we, as human beings, we are always trying to convey in any relationship. And this is true whether you're talking in a doctor-patient relationship, you're talking peer-to-peer, you're talking in a social or friend relationship. We're always, then this is where the likable and badass comes from, right? Two things we always need to figure out about another human being. The first is, what are their intentions toward us? Are they there to help us, or are they there to hurt us? And obviously, we want to be in relationships and in interactions with people we think are going to make our lives better, not people who we think are going to make our lives worse. So the way I often describe it is, if you lived in cave person times and you're in your own cave minding your business, and an unknown cave person walks into your cave, the first and most important thing you need to figure out is, why are they there, right?
Are they
there
to kill me?
Are they going to kill me and steal my
You're gonna
food?
share some mammoth leg?
Right. Or did they have a really big hunt and they can't eat it all? So here it is. Like so that's the most important thing. And that's what we do too. So the first thing we always try to figure out is, do you care? And people will judge, make judgments about whether someone is warm and other oriented like that in fractions of a second. And they will judge it quicker than they judge your competence. But that'll come second, because that's the second thing we need to figure out. So once I figure out the cave person is not there to kill me, they are there to help me hunt, then the next most important question is, are you any good at hunting? Because if you're not, I'm not taking you with me. You're just going to slow me down. And so, are you capable? So when you think about the signals you send off, so we can't tell whether someone cares or whether they're capable. That's unobservable. We're just reading signals that make it true. So if I smile at you, you think, oh, I'm friendly. My intentions are good because I have a friendly nonverbal expression. If I say something and you declare it as a statement rather than ask it as a question, you think I know what I'm talking about because I've just said it as if it is a fact. And therefore I seem more capable, like I know what's happening. So those types of subtle behaviors, the reason that they have impact is not the behavior itself. It's because the audience is drawing a conclusion about these two really important dimensions. So on the cover of the book, I call that likable and badass, but it's, are you other oriented and are you results oriented? So what we are trying to do in every relationship, and this is true in every medical relationship as well, is to signal to people, right? So if we want to advance in our hospital hierarchy or our medical hierarchy, we need to convince the people who have the power to make it happen that we really care about them. We care about the institution. We're not just out for ourselves, and we're really capable. If they put us in this task, we're going to execute it really well. And the more that people believe those two things, the more they want you in that position. And the less they believe them, the less they want you in that. So that's really what all that signaling is about.
But this is so important because there is a mismatch to the way that we are trained as doctors. And the mismatch, I mean, like you just said it, care and competence, so simple, so easy, but very dissonant to the way that a lot of men and women are taught about being in healthcare. So if you think about like the roles of going through medical school and this kind of like roller coaster of I'm at the top, I'm now at the bottom, I'm at the top, I'm now at the bottom. It's one of those situations where people are hazed in some ways. And so the way that you kind of grow into your own as an attending is you have the badass, but not the likable part. You have the I'm an asshole and not a badass, and you see it, like nurses eat their own when they're training nurses, doctor eat their own when they're training. So that C part, the first, well, they're both C, care and compassion, or care and competence, but the care part is oftentimes someone walks in the door, face is like this, it's flat, there's not a lot of warmth, or you're working with a team. I will never forget some of could be the most competent, but on the surface, I worked with some really not kind residents, or at least that's what they were on the surface when I was a medical student. I remember their names. I will not say them now, but like, I would never want them to take care of me. I would never want them to be on the team, but that was almost the way we were trained because, and I could see this more for women than men, if you didn't match the assholeness of the attending, or if you didn't have the brash kind of edge, you were left behind or thought not to be competent. So it was almost as you had to be not kind in the community to be, when I say the community, meaning the resident team or the hospital team, to be seen as competent. And that may go back to misogyny, it may go back to kind of like the way roles, et cetera, but this is a very different construct of care and competence than what we sometimes see in healthcare, at least in the internal workings.
Well, when you're describing this, as a psychologist, it makes perfect sense to me because what happens, and we want to do the best to coach ourselves to overcome this, is there's a natural human tendency that people think that they have to choose between being seen as really competent or being seen as really nice and likable. They think there's a choice to be made. And so they act like there's a choice. So when you task people, and you see this in studies, you task people with go into this situation and convince everybody you're really capable. What do people instinctively do? They get less nice. Not just in the medical field, they get less nice in general because they like, so if you think about an interview, or if you are like medicine is a field in which the expectations of competence are off the charts, like the amount of things you have to know and the way that things change and the life and death nature of what you're doing. Like competence is not optional. Like you have to be excellent. So when you're in this feeling of like from the second year in medical school of, oh my God, how am I going to do this? You're so obsessed with being competent that given what I've just said, it's natural that people think, how do I show I'm competent? I get less nice. I get more serious. I get like a more authoritative because that's what's going to make people think I'm competent. And yeah, it might, but the other dimension also really matters, and it matters for everybody. So does it matter? Like, can men get away with being jerky more than women? Yeah, but nobody likes a jerky guy either. And I say this, like at some point, even those guys who have kind of made it, that are still jerks, everyone knows, everyone talks about it, and everyone does everything they can to work around them and kind of push them to the side, right?
But that's dangerous in healthcare.
It is, yeah. So, and when you see, so I think I would say to people, look, care and competence are two dimensions, not one. So yes, you cannot sacrifice perceptions of your competence. It won't go well for you. But the way to do it is not to get less nice. The way to do it is to show how competent you are, and then also find ways to show that you care. And when you look for them and you see people who are really successful, they are able to do both. Like you look at that person and you're like, that person clearly knows what they're talking about. And that person's also a really nice person to interact with and hang around, and you gravitate. And when you see somebody like that, if you're coming up in the field, what I would say is when you spy somebody and you think, wow, they have it both, like they have the full package, what I would do is I would stare at them as long as it takes and study them and say, what are they doing? Because if you believe that they're really competent and they're really caring, it's not because you can read their mind. It's because they're doing something that your brain is reacting to. And what you need to figure out is, what are they doing, right? Maybe it's just like the moments that they stop and like make full eye contact and engage with people as they're walking down the hall, right? It's a small thing like that. Or, maybe it's that when someone interrupts them, they actually turn and look at them and they say, yes, like, how can I help you? Whatever it is, something they're doing, you're reading. And then what I would think about is, could I do that? Does that fit me? Because the way we learn to send these signals is by reading the signals that other people have sent and adopting the ones that we can. Because when I say signals, it's because the truth is that you are really caring and you are really capable. So that's the facts. You just need to figure out how to communicate that to other people. But when you see people who are really secure. So I had this, experience in terms of healthcare. My dad has been battling something, and so I was accompanying him to a variety of different visits with specialists and stuff. And we went. My dad's he's from Pitt. I grew up in Pittsburgh, which has a good medical community and stuff. And so, he's like lived there a really long time, and his friends are doctors. And so it happens when you get sick, like, oh, I'm going to call my buddy so and so. No one can get in to see so and so, but I'm going to get you in because he's the absolute best and whatever. So we go to see so-and-so, and I would sit there and I would watch. And these guys who are clearly like, they're in a good medical system. They're clearly very well regarded nationally, internationally for what they do. And they were lovely. And why were they lovely? Because I don't think they doubted their capability or competence anymore. And they knew that everybody else acknowledged it too. And so they didn't have to make that trade of like, I have to show you how doctory I am. They were like, all right, they just kind of like sit down on the stool and they're like, oh, what do we got going on here? Let's do this, and they're joking around and you could see my dad like really like warm up to them. It was fascinating to watch. And so I think that comes from feeling like once you've checked the capability box and you feel confident that you've done it and everyone else knows you've done it, people get nicer. But what I would say is you're going to get nicer as you get older, like just start now. Not at the expense of your competence, but alongside it.
So my only concern with the advice you gave about watching people is that if I had somebody just follow me around my whole day staring at me, I would start to get really uncomfortable. So
you do need to be subtle about it. Like, I don't think you should lean in and go like,
oh, you know what? I need red glasses too. Okay, there we go. Now
There we go. Amazing. Woohoo. I'm loving the red glasses. I just love them.
So good.
So cool. I think number one, I could talk with you about this forever because I think I'm sure we both could. It's really interesting, especially since Lara and I are both in the startup space and the entrepreneur space and the healthcare executive space. You see these behaviors a lot. You see them a lot, especially with people that are starting new products and services and so yes, we saw it in the healthcare space when we were little doctors and even not middle-sized, but middle-aged doctors. And then now we're older and not doctoring as much. And now moving into the startup space. We're seeing some of these behaviors that we saw in residency again. I'll speak up Lara for a second. There's just this one time, not again, but so take this today. But she taught me about entrepreneurial karma, and just how to start up karma and how important it was to help out folks, to take your competence and show people that you care by going to help them. And it really becomes, I mean, she's helped me, I've helped her, we work together, but it's not just us. It's so if I were to watch you all day, Lara, so even though I might be a little cuckoo, you are helping people. And I think it's exciting to see that you've traded cruelty for care. And
finally, I shook it off.
Finally.
That's right.
But it's important. So we only have a couple minutes left, but I wanted to say, so you've drawn out some really important things. So care and competence. I love that. That's a framework I think that we could, just people could take and run with, and I can run with it and really remember that and think about that. The two is kind of the power versus status. You talked about that and kind of the dynamic that happens when you're in the hospital. We talked about bias and how that works. We also talked about the importance of starting early in your career, negotiating high, because it starts to become kind of like an anchor point for your later life. And we also talked about the importance of, and I love this, cognitive diversity. That is a term that I don't know why I've not really thought about it in that way. We always talk about diversity in general, but when you kind of tie it to the cognitive, the experience, the differences in brain, it totally makes sense. So kind of your last couple of minutes here, if you were to look at the healthcare system and say, okay, it is unstable, we can probably all agree that there's a lot of instability in the healthcare system now. There's a lot of issues with not having the right leadership in our healthcare system, all the way from politics down to the hospital level. What do you think that women and then men can do to help make it more stable in promoting women in leadership position, if we see that it's important to have more cognitive diversity for bettering healthcare?
Yeah, so I would say two things. I mean, there's some interesting research on allyship that shows that if they look at gender, men believe and will report, and I think this is accurate, that they care a lot about creating power equity, status equity, gender representation equity, in organizations. They care. They want it to happen. But when you ask them, what are they doing to make it happen? The answer is not a lot. And I think that describes a lot of people that I know, and not just men, but being an ally for anybody. And why? The psychology of why I think is really important. Why? Because it is vulnerable to stand up on behalf of a group that you are not part of. Because you worry, is my advocacy welcome? I'm an outsider, right? And do I know? And so that vulnerability keeps people on the sidelines, because we don't want to make a mistake. We don't want, even though our heart is in the right place, to do something that will cause us reputational harm. And I feel that a lot. I think about that a lot in regards to groups that I'm not part of, because again, you don't want to be seen as doing something inappropriate or overstepping. So I would say two things. The first is that if you are sitting there in a position of privilege or power and you have an idea as to how to be helpful to people who have less privilege and less power, and you're wondering, is my advocacy welcome? It's a valid thing to feel vulnerable about, but I would say is get over it and do it anyway, because it is welcome, right? People who lack power and privilege will never get in a better situation if the people who have it aren't willing to use theirs for their benefit. So like, be willing to step in and say, you know what, people will probably appreciate this, and just do it. But I also think the thing that we also have to do is to ask for the allyship, to back this idea of being specific about what we want. So if you see opportunities for people, not just to help you, but to help elevate women in general, it would, and have ideas about what they are, the more specific you can be and go ask people. So if Adam, someone came to you and said, like, here's something that you could do, Adam, that would really make a difference. If it was within your power to do, you'd probably be like, sweet, thanks for telling me. Like, I'm really happy to do it. And I think that's really important. We have to, the more we invite people into the conversation and invite allies. So, I mean, I'll give you like a really simple example. Because I speak a lot to women, I'll speak to a lot of like women's ERGs, or I'll even go into hospitals and speak to like female surgeons and things like that. And they'll like put the invite out there, but they won't like invite anybody. If the invite just says like female surgeon thing, and if you saw that, Adam, like, you may not go because you would think, I'm not invited. It's not for me. As opposed to saying, would it be helpful if I showed up and sat, as a show of my support for what's going on? That idea may not even occur to you. But if I said, like, they'll be like, none of the guys are here. And I said, well, your invite says women on it. I mean, I don't think they're not there out of protest. I think they're there because they're trying to be respectful to the fact that you put a boundary on this thing. Yeah. If you want someone to come and say, like, I need you to sit in the front row, I need you to ask the first question, I need you to go up to the person who spent all their free time organizing this and tell them it was a great event at the end, you would be like, check, and check, I'll do all of this, whatever. So I see just these little moments where people could start to be allies for each other if they were just, bridging that communication gap. And I think that will be helpful for thinking about the representation piece, which is probably not everything that's required to make healthcare stable, but certainly will be in the right direction.
Amazing. Lara, over to you. Last comments.
I just want to say thank you because I'm such a fangirl. I got the book like the second it came out, and it is funny and hilarious, and it's something that I made a little light box that has some of my favorite sayings on it, because it's something that put words to things I've learned that work for me, and it also is a book that I think you have to go back and read once a year. So you have to buy it and then give it to somebody and then buy another copy so you have one as a backup, because
that's what I did. I bought it.
Brilliant marketing strategy. Yes. Yeah.
Right. And this has been a big treat for me because Adam was also one of my business school professors. So I'm like, this is so fun. Anyway, thank you. I know you're the busiest person in the world, and I'm so just grateful you came to talk to us today.
We are, and so that wraps up another episode of Unstable Vitals, trying to make healthcare more stable. And so, so we really appreciate you, Alison, for being on. Yes, you are a favorite of ours, and best of luck. Keep getting that book out there. And
I saw it's in German now.
One. Yeah,
it is in German. Yeah. Well, right back at both of you. I'm so grateful. This is awesome.
Well, thank you very much. Take care.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Thanks for tuning in to Unstable Vitals. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to follow us for more unfiltered conversations on the pulse of healthcare. Connect with us on LinkedIn or visit unstablevitals.com to stay in the loop. And don't forget, real change starts with real talk. See you next time.